Howdy, hi, hello, it's me, Waifu Belector, still the only fair human on Earth, of course. And here we are. We have reached the midpoint of the year. And that, of course, means that we've also reached the gaming year midpoint as well. And we all know a big part of a year in gaming is the game of the year. Personal games of the year, of course, but then there's also all sorts of lists and stuff compiling the best of the year. And also sort of the big one, the Game Awards Game of the Year. Now I know we're only halfway through the year and there are plenty of games to come, but what do we think is Game of the Year right now? Who would win if we had to choose out of what we've got? That's what I'm here to talk about today. But listen, I do my own list of the best games at the end of the year, and I of course have my own game of the year each year. Last year in 2023 it was Jedi Survivor, in 2022 it was God of War Ragnarok, and in 2021, even though I wasn't doing YouTube then, it was Inscription. So I will have a list and a game of the year this year. So in this video, I want to talk about what I believe will be the game of the year at the Game Awards and amongst the people, you know, at least with what we have so far. So before I continue, please remember to drop a like if you end up enjoying and consider subscribing too. Thanks in advance. Now then, what games have even come out this year, right? What the fuck are we even working with? Well, there have actually been a decent amount of noteworthy games that have come out so far, even if the last couple of months have been a little on the dry side. There's been Dragon's Dogma 2, Rise of the Ronin, Stellar Blade, Hellblade 2, Power World, Tekken 8, not necessarily in that order, and just to name a few. But to me, there are only two games with a hope of winning this year so far: Helldivers 2 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Because when you're talking about the Game Awards Game of the Year, there's obviously a lot of politics at play. And there are even politics at play in people's personal lists. Everyone, individuals and publications alike, are more concerned with the perception of their picks rather than just saying what they believe to be true. And so far of the games released this year, I believe Helldivers and Final Fantasy are the two that most people will feel confident in choosing. But of these two contenders, which one has the best shot? Well, I'd say that FF7 Rebirth has a bit of an edge here, and not even for a good reason really. I think it'll more likely be the Game Awards Game of the Year just because it's a single player game. And if you pay any attention to the games industry and games journalism, you'll know that generally games media does not value multiplayer games in that way. They don't typically have a reverence for the craft of multiplayer games or view them as art, even if they think, hey, that's a fun game. Games media generally views primarily multiplayer games the same way that non-gamers view all games. Like, oh yeah, that's a cute little fun childish hobby, but it has no real value, you know? That is the typical sentiment, despite me disagreeing with it. But yeah, just because of that, I do think Final Fantasy has a bit of an advantage. However, the Game Awards could attempt to shift the perception and show that they don't think of multiplayer games as less than by taking this chance to give a highly regarded multiplayer game the Game of the Year award. Because Helldivers does fit into the politics enough as well. People like the game, they like the story of the game not being expected to do much but blowing that out of the water. The game is pretty much universally adored, and at this point, I don't think many people would have a problem if it was chosen as the Game of the Year. I honestly think that so far it is the people's Game of the Year, but Final Fantasy is the current journalist's Game of the Year. And that's not a knock on either group, because I think both choices make sense right now, and Helldivers and Final Fantasy are the clear frontrunners when you factor in public sentiment. Oh, and if you're one of the people who's like, Elden Ring is Game of the Year, Please stop. Shadow of the Erd Tree is not a game. It's a DLC. Stop playing dumb. Stop pretending. Stop rodeo riding FromSoft, please, okay? Elden Ring already won Game of the Year, and FromSoft got it even before that with Sekiro. We don't need to start giving them Game of the Year for DLCs. So let's put that one to bed for anyone remotely serious about that suggestion. But anyway, it's like I've been saying. We're only at the halfway mark, and I believe the battle for Game of the Year would be between Helldivers 2 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth if we had to call it right now. But there are still lots of games to come, and without playing them purely off of assumption, are there any that might change the current frontrunners? I'd say there are, but to varying degrees. Let's start with what I view as the least likely, but still has a chance. Avowed. I think Avowed has enough buzz and relevance to fight for number one if it actually performs. But personally, I don't have very high hopes for it. But in the event that it turns out to be a great game, I think some will claim it to be Game of the Year. And I honestly wouldn't have mentioned Avowed here, but I liked their most recent showing during Summer Game Fest, not E3 time. The game looked significantly better than before, and I was impressed with Obsidian's direct response to criticism about earlier showings of the game and them adapting to that via gameplay refinement. I like that response, I like what I saw recently, and so I have a little more hope for the possibility of greatness for Avowed. Another game in the could be section, I think, is gonna be Astrobot, PlayStation's upcoming platformer. This game has a lot of buzz and positive sentiment, but in all honesty, people don't really flock to games like this unless it's Mario. So I'm waiting to see if the positive buzz translates into game sales or if it's all talk. But I'm not really doubting the quality of this game. Don't be surprised if it ends up on my personal list for the best games of the year. But as for the people's game of the year, I'm not convinced yet that the gaming world is gonna put their money where their mouth is. But okay, enough iffy competitors for the throne. Who is really likely to challenge the current top two? I'll start with Black Myth Wukong. This game has a lot of hype. It's been hyped for years, and what we've seen of it looks great, and if it remotely delivers, I don't think people will hesitate to call it their game of the year. I think people want it to be game of the year. I think it's fantasy game of the year already in a lot of people's heads, and I think it has to be pretty definitively underwhelming to stop people from screaming that this is the best game of the year from the rooftops. I think there's a strong chance for game of the year for Black Myth Wukong. However, a lot of what we've seen of the game is very old, and a lot of what we've been shown has been very curated. This game still feels incredibly mysterious to me, and I doubt it's just me. And that can mean one of two things. That they're hiding the game because it's significantly more disappointing than we imagine, or they're hiding a lot of the good shit to generate unspoiled player moments. We hope it's the latter, but it's kinda hard to catch the vibe, Still, I think Wukong has a good chance of becoming 2024's most unanimous game of the year. But a chance is just that, still only a chance. The other game I think will be a big battler for Game of the Year, if it does in fact release this year, is Metal Gear Solid Delta, the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. It's a contender if for no other reason than it's Metal Gear Solid. The power of its name alone makes it a contender. And you might be thinking, well, there's a Call of Duty coming out this year, that's a name, and it's got a lot of positive buzz right now. But let's not forget that Call of Duty is primarily multiplayer. So even if Black Ops 6 is the best Call of Duty ever made, it won't win. But back to MGS Delta, because this game has to really fold to not at least to get a nomination. It's guaranteed that, and it also has a chance to get hyped up into Game of the Year. However, this is a remake of an old game, and it appears to be a pretty faithful remake of an old game, bordering on possibly detrimentally so. Where you play it and it feels like you're playing an old game just made to look pretty. Obviously, I can't really make any conclusions right now. We've got to actually play the damn thing. But yeah, The name of this IP and the reverence for this entry in particular, especially with a lot of the more elder gamers who run games media, will be a massive boon for this game in its quest for that Game of the Year spot. But, per usual, only time will tell. So alright, that's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. Just having a quick chat with you all. I'd love to read what your Game of the Year so far is, and what do you think it'll end up being by the end. Leave your comments about that, I really do want to see. For now, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. I'd tell you to like and subscribe, but you're gonna do whatever the fuck you want. So until next time, I am Waifu Collector. I am just a normal guy. I like hentai, and we'll finish this conversation at the end of the year. Goodbye.